You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
So welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Debbie Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Turning Point, along with my co-host, Sherry Love, who is our nurse manager, and Nikki, who is always behind the scenes on the headset. With us today is Peggy, who is going to share her story and just about overcoming her past. So thank you so much, Peggy, for being with us today.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. So your journey, I think, would surprise most people, because I think in our heads we have this picture of what the woman looks like who has experienced abortion. And I think most of the times we think of young, we think of single, we think of no family support and circumstances driving, but that really wasn't the case with your story, was it?
No, I was married. I had one daughter, and she was 18 months old. And the idea of having a second child with a husband that was in college, no insurance, it was just too much. I couldn't disappoint my family. I couldn't bear that shame of, here I go again. So I turned to everybody, and nobody gave me another option besides abortion.
So when you say you turned to everybody, who did you turn to in that time?
My husband, he didn't put any input into it, just like, oh boy, can't do this again. When I went to the gynecologist and I said, I can't do it. And he was very quick to say, you can have an abortion, but not here. I had to go down to the church and talk with a priest about it, and he didn't give me any options either. It wasn't, maybe you should consider adoption, maybe you should, consider other, no, it was, oh yeah, you have a good reason, and here is the name and the address for where you can get an abortion in New York City.
So you basically had to have a referral.
I had to have a referral, yep.
From the priest or from a doctor? Who did it
The
have
doctor told me what priest I had to go to. I started in Massachusetts, worked my way to Connecticut, and finally ended up in New York City.
Wow. And so when he said you had a reason for abortion, what was the reason in his mind, do you think?
That I was afraid that it would collapse my marriage, and I had a daughter to think about, and I was only 19 years old, and what could I do? And he thought that was good enough, that I was stressed enough, and I didn't need another child in my life.
So everyone that you talked to didn't talk to you about other options?
No, not one. It was as soon as I said, I can't go through this pregnancy, it was understood that, oh yeah, you don't have to. And that was back in the 70s, where it still wasn't, Roe v. Wade still wasn't. I mean, they were still debating that.
Wow. And so I can't imagine having those kind of conversations with my gynecologist. And so did you have anybody that was kind of a personal connection to have those talks with, to kind of talk through what this was going to look like?
No. I had no idea what the abortion was going to look like until I was on the table.
So no education even when you
No.
got to the clinic. We hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah. And I sat in the room with girls that were teenagers sitting with their moms, that I don't think they had any idea what was going to happen. It was just, it was going to be okay as soon as it was over and you could get back to your life.
And what do you think about that now?
It left a big scar in my life that never healed, that I didn't realize because everybody told me it was going to be okay, that I could forget about it, but you can't.
So how did it impact your life long term?
It led to a lot of negative behavior, not liking myself. Eventually, the breakdown of my marriage because I drank too much. I was too promiscuous. And
Did you connect that to the abortion at that time?
no, that came after. Once I realized that that was a wound that was so far buried, but it was never allowed to heal, that I could never mourn for my child,
Right.
that I had to forget he ever existed.
So that behavior wasn't behavior that you had participated in before your abortion?
No, not to the extent. I mean, I had premarital sex, but that was more because I couldn't say no to anybody. And if somebody asked me, I didn't have the basic understanding of God's word that it was okay for me to say, no, that's not right. And this is why.
I love that you're willing to share that because we hear that behind closed doors in here a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The not feeling like you're able to say no, the lack of knowledge of the boundaries that you have a right to. And yet you don't hear that conversation taking place really anywhere in a public arena or where there can be wisdom added to it or, you know.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love that you're able to express that.
I mean, it's supposedly in this day and age with the Me Too movement, it comes across that you can say no, but if you're in a serious relationship and you try to tell your partner, no, not tonight, it's not accepted.
Right. And I love what La Pignon said when they came in. Krista said, what did she say? Yes is yes and everything else is no.
Right.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
even have to be verbalized. If you are not comfortable and you are not wanting or willing to participate, that means no. You didn't have to express it verbally, which I think
Right.
before it was, well, she never said no. That
Yeah.
was kind of the out for all of that. So
Right. So how did you feel after the abortion? Like when the abortion was over and then you come home and...
I ended up in the bedroom and I cried in private, but I didn't feel I could let anyone else in, that I was sad. And my husband at the time just looked at me and he goes, oh, your hormones will straighten out.
Mm-hmm.
It was not an emotional thing. It was more of a physical thing that I was going through, which told me that, bury it. It's done. It's over with.
And I think that's the normal, natural
Right.
response because it's too much to handle. I mean, truly. I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest part. We bury it so deep. So the two of you never had a conversation
No,
about what it was like or what you went through or how you were feeling.
no.
Who took you?
Because we had to go from Massachusetts to New York City and we didn't have a car at the time, it was a good friend.
Mm.
And we stayed at his parents' house that night before we came back. And even those people, they watched my daughter while I was there. They watched her because I couldn't pick her up or anything. The doctors warned me about that and they kind of took care of her that way, but it was more her and my husband, and I was I guess they were ashamed, they didn't really want to acknowledge it.
And maybe, I was wondering if maybe they felt uncomfortable asking you about it or talking about it and
Probably.
didn't want to make you feel more uncomfortable. But when people don't want to ask questions or come alongside for support, sometimes it's because I think they're uncomfortable with what is going on.
Yeah.
Just easier to act like it
Didn't happen.
Yeah. So Peggy, you and I did a study a while back and the book asked you to draw a picture of what it was like, your abortion experience or how you've been living life. Do you mind sharing like what you drew, just trying to describe that illustration that you did?
When I asked God how he wanted me to show it, he showed me basically a big pit that was full of heat and molten and, well, like the Bible says, a slimy pit, except it wasn't an open pit. It had a very small hole at the top. And whenever everything got churning up inside, there was a release. And that's, in my opinion, that's when I would act out. When I'd yell at my kids, or I'd go drink too much, listen to my boss that it was okay to have an extramarital affair. It was those release of all that negativity that had built up over the years that I never addressed. I didn't open up the pit and let everything out.
Yeah, and I love that visual that you did. I wish we had audio or video, because it was fiery and intense, and you're just creative and artistic too, which helped. But it was the tiniest spout, and it helped me because so many of the women that we see coming in with post-abortion and ready to do recovery, that's exactly how they describe it, is just enough release to keep the pit from exploding open, but enough venting to make life completely chaotic and just messy.
Yeah.
And not really knowing how to deal with it.
And that not knowing why I would blow up over something so small.
Yeah. So knowing that it was, or looking back and seeing that it was mostly the men in your life, whether it was your husband, your gynecologist, your priest, did that help impact or influence the way that you saw men after that?
Yeah, the fact that, even when I was younger, I didn't feel I could say no to anybody, but after that, it was like, men ruled, and if I even questioned them, that wasn't right. And they were number one in my life. And even it got twisted with the Bible that, as a woman, you must be submissive to your husband, but not to the point where you disobey God. And
yeah, that could be a really long series right there.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Itself.
Right. People usually don't even like the word submissive.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different meanings that aren't biblical.
Yeah. Yeah. We take it completely out of context.
Right.
So what would your words of advice be, maybe to a woman who's had an abortion in her past, whether it's, recently a couple of years or even many years like yours? What would you say to them?
You have to realize that the hurt is there, that we were created to take care of and protect our children to death itself. And we went against that nature, and there are consequences to that. And you have to open up that wound and deal with it if you ever want to be healed, because you're not going to be healed until you deal with it.
Yeah. And I know there are probably some women who are listening who would not agree, but I think from us and the number of women we see coming through the doors, that's the biggest thing they feel, is that they should have been the protector. And it was the natural instinct, and they went against it. And so we don't want to open up that debate and that argument, but your story is your story, and the way that you feel is the way that you feel. And from what we see of women walking through the door that are post-abortive, that is the way they feel. And so, yeah, we appreciate you sharing that. What would you say to the young woman who is expecting and doesn't feel like she can do it, doesn't feel like there is no other choice?
There's always a choice, and there's a consequence for any decision you make, whether it be good or bad. It's not going to be easy to raise a child, but the blessings far outweigh any negativity. And on the other hand, it sounds like it's a good alternative to end a life, but the downside is it will really have a bad impact on your life for years to come. I mean, people, they don't realize how destructive it is.
When did you feel like you made that turn where you started talking about it and opening up, like you said, opening up the wound?
When I first started the study with Debbie, and I read the book and realized her story was so much like mine. And even on the videos, it's every woman's story, even though there are little differences here and there, the basic story is the same.
Yeah. And it's funny, we always think everybody is different or everybody has it together or everybody goes through, but I mean, we really are. It's different because we're uniquely made. But, you know, I go into your kitchen and it's going to take me 2 minutes to find where you keep your spoons. You know, I mean, we're all so similar,
Right.
even though we're so distinct. And so, yeah, the common thread, definitely, and the common theme of just the shame and the guilt and the remorse and all of it. And again, that's kind of brings us back to why we do this. We want to have those conversations so that somebody who is struggling will hear, and it'll kind of hopefully resonate with them. I love when we start doing a post-abortion recovery, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the different segments, and one of those is anger. And it always amazes me how many people are like, well, I don't really struggle with anger. You know, but by the time we get to the chapters leading up to it, they're like, oh my gosh, I have so much anger. And I think it's very valid anger. And just to work through those things is an amazing process. So, well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and just being vulnerable and talking about what you've gone through. It helps. I think it helps other women to hear it, to understand it, because all of us have been involved with abortion one way or another, whether it was a family member or somebody we knew or ourselves. I mean, 1 in 4 women in the church, you know, have had an abortion. So that's a lot of women surrounding us, sitting next to us. And so you think about those statistics, it's pretty high. So we've all been impacted one way or another, and it's not an easy thing sometimes to deal with. So thank you.
Yes,
And especially seeing that for the first 25 years of my marriage, we looked like the perfect couple. We had it all together, and that was a lie. Behind the door, we didn't have it all together, and I think he suffered too because he could never acknowledge the fact that he lost a son.
Yeah, and the impact that has on men as well. Definitely. Well, thank you so much. So if you're listening today and you are struggling with an unplanned pregnancy or just want to talk to somebody about what to do, you can feel free to text Helpline to 313131 or call 1-800-712-HELP. Also, if you are a woman who has a previous abortion and you just want to find out more information or learn about getting some help and just realize kind of the awareness of you're not alone, you can visit silentnomore.awareness.org. And remember, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, visit our website at pregnancylosscruces.com. We're also on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe. And please leave us a comment or a review. We really want to hear your feedback. We want to hear if this is beneficial, if you have input to help us improve. We would love to hear from you. And again, remember, stars can't shine without darkness.